thinks he wants to be. Hello and welcome back, everyone, to the mid-season major of the Eternal Tournament series. I am, of course, Bairdrus, and once again joined by my wonderful co-host, Truedawn. And we are about to jump into Group B. What happened off-screen for you all while we were taking our short break was, if we go over the bracket information, we see that aReNGee took down Shed with his Fiery Combrano deck over Shed's TJP, or not TJP, excuse me, FTJ Vault deck that the Team Voprex players brought. So aReNGee is advancing on, and we're going to see him play off against a Loco Pojo on his Elysian mid-range deck, who took a 2-1 victory over Lubup, who was on the TJP mid-range deck. So bottom part of the bracket, we've got Shed on FTJ Vault versus Lubup, who is on the TJP mid-range deck. Those players are going to be playing off to face the loser of aReNGee and Loco Pojo, who we are about to see in just a moment.
Yep, it'll be this is going to be an interesting matchup. I really like Loco Pojo's deck. He has a lot of interaction relative to how much this Elysian deck usually does. He has 4 Predator's Instinct to go along with all of his giant creatures like Sandstorm Titan and Cerso and Predatory Carnosaur, which can kill his stuff again, and Mystic Ascendant. So his creatures are in general bigger than everyone's, but specifically in this matchups are bigger than all of aReNGee's creatures. So that Predatory Instinct is a large portion of the time just going to be a 1-mana removal spell, unless aReNGee can break up the killer with a Desert Marshal.
Yeah, absolutely. And on aReNGee's side, we see a Combrano mid-range deck. I did call this, Acaria Gold, or the Fiery Combri. Whatever name you wish to attribute to it. This is a bit of a more interesting build, though. We're used to seeing the Combrano mid-range decks attributed to having a lot of weapons in them, and we do see 3 copies of Rise to the Challenge in aReNGee's deck. However, there is only a single Auric Runehammer in the main board as far as weapons are concerned, and one other Auric Runehammer in the sideboard. So no Stone Scar Mauls, no Die Shows, no Sword of the Sky King here. More of a unit-centric deck we're seeing out of aReNGee here.
Yeah, in order to play all the weapons, you kind of press yourself to playing things like Throne Warden and Artisan to really maximize all of that. And if you want to just play a more good cards deck and not really focus on synergies, then you could still keep the Auric Runehammer because that's still a very good cards to Rise for on baseline. But it looks like aReNGee just wants to play a good mid-range deck with access to Rise the Challenge for his important top end, not necessarily weapons, just using the Auric Runehammer as a removal spell that he can get with his Rise to the Challenge, giving it more flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to be an interesting matchup for sure. I do like Loco Pojo's inclusion of Arena Frogs in here. This could prove to be very useful against aReNGee's deck. He's got a ton of 4-ofs that you'd be looking to hit here. Mystic Ascendant, Harsh Rule, Great Parliament, and Sandstorm Titan, just to name a few. We'll see if that ends up coming down for him here. Loco Pojo's deck is very teched up, I have to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of 1-ofs. There's a 1-of Xenobalist, the 1 of Rated Frogs you just talked about, the 1 of Decay, 1 of Elian's Favor, 1 of Infinite Hourglass, which I'm an advocate of. I think it's worth the deck slot in most time decks. Just having everything of endurance is just very useful, especially when you have 4 Predator's Instinct.
Yeah, definitely. The Four Predators Instinct certainly make the Xenon or the Infinite Hourglass a lot better. And Infinite Hourglass is just going to be very solid in this tournament as a whole, with all these FTJ Vault style decks running around. That Infinite Hourglass allows for the Elysium mid range deck to really swing in a lot and not actually get punished by getting, blown up on the backswing. But we'll see how that plays out as we move into game one between Loco Pojo and aReNGee.
Yep. And we do also see the 3 polymorphs in the Loco Pojo's deck, 2 of which are in that hand. That's another one of Primal Time's good removal spells. It's very bad against weapons because the weapon still stays around, but if we're not in a metagame or he didn't expect a metagame where like Deep Forge plates and things like that would be prevalent, Polymorph just kills most things.
Yeah, it really does. And, aReNGee has a ton of targets that Loco Pojo is going to be looking to polymorph, including just a few of the ones we had named off a minute ago. Jack, Mystic Ascendant, Marshall, Ironthorn, Sandstorm, Titan, all going to be very, very big hits out of the polymorph. We'll see how that works out. Loco Pojo, on the other hand, has a nice little start here. He's going to be slow off the gate, but he will have False Prince down on turn 3, and he's going to really tax aReNGee into finding a way to deal with this.
Yeah, aReNGee is very spot removal light. He only has the 4 Torch, 4 Vanquish, so we'd have to have one of those to deal with the False Prince, but he needs one of those to deal with like most of the cards in Loco Pojo's deck. Like, you're going to need to deal with Sursa, you're going to need to deal with Sandstorm Titan, Predatory Carnosaur, Mystic Ascendant. So Loco Pojo just has so many more threats than aReNGee has answers.
Yeah, he really does. And just waiting for aReNGee to decide what he's going to do here. Probably just some sort of a power play and then pass his turn, as I don't really think that the Fiery Combri deck or Combrano really has any early game interaction. You have find the way to find yourself some extra power, but outside of that, really, find the way and seek power are really the cards you would be playing on your early turns. Torch is definitely going to be more of a reactive card here, as is Desert Marshal. Not going to play that one naked onto the board with so many juicy threats floating around in Loco Pojo's deck to hit with it.
Yeah, the traditional Combrano decks don't have any proactive turn 2 plays other than Find the Way, I guess, is technically proactive. It doesn't impact the board, but it does advance your game plan in some fashion. So there's just it's a pretty slow start for decks like this, which is why I like things like Serrano's deck.
Yeah, certainly. I thought Toth had a very interesting build, of the Acaria Gold Fiery Combrano. And the fact that he was on Awakened Student, and we saw those come in to great effect in his games earlier on when he was playing against Ilya K. We saw those Awakened Students really push a lot of that early game pressure that the Combrano mid-range deck doesn't otherwise have. It is definitely more of a slow mid-range deck that you're trying to push towards the late game and try and outvalue your opponent, and also taking advantage of cards like Arise to the Challenge to find the specific threat you want to use against your opponent. Acaria obviously being the prime example in the deck. The card that the deck often draws its name from, even.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's functionally a big Combrade deck that's quote unquote splashing Acaria and like getting Torch and Rise the Challenge. So if you can call like 3 triple red a splash, the rest of the deck is primarily just the shell of Big Combrade.
Yeah, absolutely. aReNGee dropping his power in and then passing. Apparently, we're getting word that he seems to be having some internet issues, so try and bear with us, folks. Unfortunately, we're going to be a little bit slower in this matchup than we want to be. But we do see the second power come down much quicker, and Pojo is going to respond in a very quick fashion himself with a power and a False Prince. Going to put aReNGee under the gun a little bit here.
And Loco Pojo will retain a frog. For anyone unfamiliar, the way that resolves is Vanquish targets False Prince. False Prince's ability to transform into frog triggers. Vanquish tries to resolve, sees that his target is now 1/1 frog, which is not a legal target, and then fizzles. So that's why you end up with a 1/1 frog.
Absolutely. Great rundown there, Truedawn. And so we do see this 1/1 frog providing what is going to be a very, very slow clock out of Loco Pojo. On the other side of the board, though, we see aReNGee go ahead and drop in this Arise to the Challenge. And I'm curious to see what card he's actually going to dig up here. It may be Akari, but Akari does have 3 solid turns before it could come down. If Pojo had any type of threat, we could see him try and bully iReed Minds out quickly. But we do see Martial Ironthorn coming down and Pojo not having anything immediately. Although
this is
now
interesting.
Oh yeah, actually, this is really interesting. I'm very curious to see him go with this line of play, but I think this actually does work out a lot better than the line I was looking at. I was looking at Predatory Carnosaur in dropping, but Loco Pojo does a little Predatory Carnosaur building of his own, dropping a Cerso and then giving a killer.
You do get 4 extra damage that way, and you get Cerso on board, which is the better threat to have on board. So I guess I favor that play. You are using 2 cards technically, but you're just playing one of the creatures on the board, so it's kind of like a lateral move either way.
Yeah, certainly. Unfortunately, the Cerso does get taken down there by the Auric Runehammer. That was what iReed Minds decided to fetch up, and we do see iReed Minds now powering up this Mystic Ascendant, which puts Pojo in a slightly awkward position. He would love to drop this Predatory Carnosaur, but obviously he doesn't want to just drop it into an empty board and have it trade off. The Sandstorm Titan as a pickup, though, makes this play a lot better, able to polymorph down the Mystic Ascendant and also fit in a big threat on curve.
Yeah, being able to do something proactive this turn is very good for Loco Pojo. He now has initiative. He's one with the threat on the board. Iron Minds is the one who has to answer it. He still has this Carnosaur to deal with the Iron Minds' next threat, and the Carnosaur kills whatever it is. Like,
Yes.
Worst case scenario, it trades.
Yeah, certainly, and we'll see what iReed Minds comes up with. I had a feeling it was going to be this great Parliament, and it is indeed. iReed Minds doesn't seem to have any sort of a follow-up here, so we're going to see this Predatory Carnosaur get in for a trade on this 4/4 Owl, and this will allow the Sandstorm Titan to attack in unchecked as well. And iReed Minds is now in a little bit of a hairy situation. He's staring down 2 very large threats on Pojo's side of the board, and he still has a unit in play, so curious to see if we're going to see iReed pop off something like a Harsh Rule this turn to go ahead and take care of the double threats.
Yeah, this is a fine spot to Harsh Rule. You need to deal with both those things. Loco Pojo only has 1 card in hand. It may or may not be a threat. We see, of course, that it's 2 threats now. He gets to play out the False Prince. So Iron Mind's still on the back foot, but there's a good chance that Iron Mind fires off that Harsh Rule. Loco Pojo's last card in hand isn't a threat, and then Iron Mind's initiative back.
Yeah, definitely. And, we see Akaria coming down for iReed Minds. This is definitely going to get in one solid swing, although based on the life totals, Pojo definitely has the quicker clock here, and it is possible that we're going to have to see the Akaria get traded out with the False Prince here.
He has a couple turns for that, I think, because this is in the Elysian deck doesn't have any reach, so Iron Mind is only ever taking the damage that's on the board. There's no surprise damage coming from anywhere, so he could have taken a hit or even 2 from that False Prince and gotten more Warcry if he wanted to.
Yeah, he probably could have overextended a little bit there, but he chooses not to. We see a huge Mystic Ascendant coming down, clearly the target of that Akaria buff. So we have an 11/11 Mystic Ascendant here, and with the Silence coming down, that's actually pretty dirty down. Not able to start creating this clock. Champion of Wisdom, one of the interesting inclusions in Loco Pojo's deck. He actually has them in as a 4/of. Trying to win the fight in the air here.
I mean, Champion of Wisdom is one of the most powerful when enabled on the turn you play it. It's hard to do that, getting 4 of both influence on turn 4. But when you do, a 4-mana 6/6 flyer is absurd.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see a Jet coming down here for iReed Minds, what he fished up off of his Rise to the Challenge. That's going to go ahead and silence and stun the Mystic Ascendant for the time being. And this looks like it's going to put Pojo in a no-win situation here. He's facing down a lethal attack without chump blocking. So he's going to have to bust this Champion of Wisdom into the Mystic Ascendant. Still going to go down to 1 health in the meantime.
I was just gonna he's done. He's not even gonna give it a shot. Just pack it in.
Yeah, and I feel him from that standpoint. Due to his deck not having any sweepers like Harsh Rule, since he's not playing Justice, it's really hard for him to fight back from that type of a position when he's only going to have a single card to pick up. So, unfortunate there. Pojo going down 1 game against iReed Minds. Let's check out if Pojo has something in his sideboard prepared for this game plan.
Pojo's sideboard is pretty interesting. He has the 3 permafrost, 2 more crystallized to go up to the full 4 if he wants to. Healer's Cloak, I assume that's more for aggressive decks. Accelerated Evolution is interesting, but again, against a deck with Sandstorm Titans, maybe not. Scouting Party, I can actually see something that's very good in a matchup like this. So possibly the Scouting Parties and maybe the Crystallizes, but we'll see.
I wonder if he will bring in something like the Healer's Cloak. It's not particularly exciting in this matchup, but maybe he will need to bring them in just to make sure that he can get out of those board stalls and have the bigger unit to fight with. Be curious to see if that's a consideration from him. In the meantime, we see Pojo looking through his deck here, keeping in his 3 backlashes, definitely going to be important in the matchup. We really didn't see a lot of changes out of his board, I don't think. He might have cut down, actually, I think he added in Crystallizes to try and combat the board, which makes some amount of sense. You do have to find a way to push past the Fiery Combri players' big threats, so which can often be a problem for the Elysian mid-range deck. I think losing the Surso there early in that game was kind of the dagger, unfortunately, for Pojo. At that point, his opponent was able to find, a huge Mystic Ascendant. Not to say that his opponent didn't have some very, very solid draws between the 2 Rise to the Challenges to find the Auric Runehammer to take care of the first threat, as well as the second one picking up Jack to kind of ensure the game. We also did see, a huge Mystic Ascendant off of that Ikaria.
Yeah, the Warcry mattered a lot. Generally, Loco Pojo's creatures are going to be able to win in combat fights against what Iron Minds is presenting. But cards like Harsh Rule and Great Parliament and Ikaria and Mystic Ascendant could provide enough advantage through other means to overcome that. And we saw that last game with the Ikaria making the 11-11. So if Loco Pojo is able to fight a fair game and keep pressure on Iron Minds and set up backlashes on Harsh Rules, he should just be able to run Iron Minds over. But if Iron Minds can slow the game down more and get to a point where he's able to leverage some value out of his other cards, then he'll be in a better spot. And in the sideboard, he has things like Protect or Stand Together, even his own Healer's Cloak to help facilitate stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see whose sideboard plan comes out and, hits a little bit harder here as we jump into game 2. Loco Pojo, definitely with an interesting hand here. Gonna have to consider whether or not he's going to keep this one, and he does in fact keep it. So
yeah, this is fine. You still get to turn 3 the False Prince. Your 3 influence towards the either 6/6 or flying side of your champion, whichever you choose with the Seek Power. Yeah, this seems completely reasonable.
Yeah, and we'll see if I Read Minds has anything to answer. Pojo here picks up another banner on the start of his turn, so likely we're just going to see a Seek Power into a Seat on his following turn, or even a Seek Power into an Elysian banner, since it'll just be powered down.
Oh, wow, he's going to have a fully powered champion on turn 4.
Yeah, he actually will. He'll have the option. He'll have the option to, at least. It'll come down to whether or not the False Prince actually sticks in play after his 3rd turn.
Yes.
I Read Mind's going to have something like a Torch to answer it very cleanly. In the meantime, though, I Read Minds just go ahead and doing a little bit of finding the way, fixing his power base and kind of ramping himself up.
And now even if this False Prince dies, he just follow up with the Sandstorm Titan, or even still play the champion as a 4/4 flyer. Pojo has a lot of good follow-ups coming up here. He's going to be putting I Read Minds to the test here for the next several turns.
Yeah, he certainly will be. And we see a Suroff coming down, but that is not really the answer I Read Minds is looking for, this False Prince. Though Pojo does have to have some sort of consideration about overextending into this board. We do see Torch coming down here, so that's going to go ahead and take care of the False Prince. Fortunately for Pojo, he did play his power preemptively, so we will see this Champion of Wisdom come down fully powered up.
And I Read Minds does have the Vanquish, so that's really good for him. And he's still going to be facing down running threats from Loco Pojo. Loco Pojo, even if he wanted to get aggressive, he could play the Staff. There's not a lot of things that do 1 extra damage from the side of I Read Minds. The safer play certainly is the Sandstorm Titan, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And he just, kind of kind of checks himself. There is Stand Together and iReNGee's sideboard. Possible that it came in here to try and deal with some of Pojo's answers, although I have to imagine that he favored Protect over Stand Together. Maybe the buff does matter enough for him, though. We will see as we push farther into this game.
He decides to use the polymorph this turn because next turn aReNGee would be on 8 mana and get to activate. He could have also played Carnosaur and killed it. Elected to use the polymorph. It's the cheaper option, which will now allow him to play this False Prince as well, extending further on the board. All the while, this Staff of Stories is just drawing cards every turn.
Yeah, I'm a little curious here about the False Prince onto the board. I feel like based on iReNGee's power that you really weren't in a situation where you needed to establish a second threat there. And Ikaria, of course, grounded due to the Sandstorm Titan, means that Pojo does overextend to the Harsh Rule a little bit and gets punished. And this does give iReNGee a window to establish, a solid threat and really put Pojo on the back foot. Unfortunately, though, iReNGee really isn't seeming to find anything here. So Pojo dropping double threats again, though. I find this a little curious.
No, this is fine because, only playing one threat isn't enough pressure, and a 2-for-1 off Harsh Roll is fine. Like, if they have it, then sure, it's a 2-for-1, but you have a staff going, so you don't care about the card economy as much. And if they don't have it, they just die. So I think the upside justifies the possible downside.
Yeah, I guess that's fair to some extent. You really are pushing a much quicker clock, and you're able to take care of your opponent in a very quick fashion if you do establish the double threats. It just does always feel a little bit bad to overextend the Harsh Roll, but with the staff in play, not going to matter too much there. And we do, in fact, see Loco Pojo bringing that game down, bringing the series back to 1 apiece, going into our deciding game 3 as to which of these players is going to advance on to day 2 and which of them will have to go down to the losers bracket and fight once again for their chance at a spot in day 2.
Yeah, this is a really close matchup. It's just two mid-range decks. Pojo is probably the more aggressive of the two. He's done a good job, at least in game 2, putting on that pressure. As long as he's able to draw some threats. Staff of Stories also is just a very powerful tool because he can play into things like Harsh Roll and just immediately refuel. When Harsh Roll is only a 2-for-1 and not a 3 or 4-for-1, you could very much beat that if you have a Staff of Stories going.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the Staff of Stories, it just does generate a lot of value, and it is very it is very interesting in this matchup. I think it was definitely a thought out call from Loco Pojo that he expected to be playing against a lot of these, mid-range board stally type decks. And when you are in those board stalls, if you can establish a Staff of Stories, it will often go unchecked, and your opponent will just sit there helplessly as they watch you draw card after card off of it.
Yeah, the Protect the Staff sub-game is an important one in a lot of these slower matchups. While Loco Pojo's deck isn't equipped to really protect it via removal, he's usually putting such a huge board in play, he can block for it, and that's good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Pojo with a slow-ish hand here, unfortunately. Not going to have a lot going on out of the gate. He's going to have to wait till turn 4 to really establish these Sandstorm Titans. Fortunately for him, though, iReNGee's on the Cumbrano mid-range tech is also going to be fairly slow out of the gate, so not a ton of pressure from either player here, really just allowing both players to slowly advance their strategies.
Yeah, this is the awkward thing that I've always encountered when I've played Elysian, is that it's like kind of an aggressively slanted deck. You have a lot of things that do a lot of damage, like Sandstorm Titan and Surso and False Prince, but there's like no 1 or 2 drops you can play that are really in line with that strategy. There's things like Stormlinks and Initiate, possibly, but you're an aggressive deck that doesn't start the game until turn 3, and that's frequently very awkward.
Yeah, and that definitely can be awkward. If you are against an aggressive deck, you can be bullied out of the matchup very quickly. But when you are against some of these slower decks like this Cumbrano-style mid-range, you really do have quite a window to power up and drop your threats. Unfortunately for Pojo, though, we see double Vanquishes here to answer from iReNGee. And Champion of Wisdom, pretty nice pickup here. That is going to at least give him a 6/6. And, ask iReNGee the question once again of, can you handle a third large threat?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that Iron Minds does have answers to like some of these big things, but Logo Pojo's entire deck is things that need to be vanquished, and Iron Minds only has 4 vanquishes. So how often is he going to have enough?
And the answer is not all the time, although we do see the Desert Marshal coming out here, which provides at least a solid block, allows aReNGee to trade, although he does have to trade off of Seraph. But since aReNGee is stuck on 4 power, holding who knows what in his hand, it's probably not the worst trade. And yeah, even there we see another Seraph coming down, so nothing he was too concerned about. On the flip side, though, Loco Pojo has this Mystic Ascendant now, and aReNGee is going to have to find an answer for this very, very quickly, or this could snowball the game too far out of control for aReNGee to handle.
Yeah, and Logo Pojo's already bled Iron Minds out of a lot of removal. He's through 2 vanquishes in the Desert Marshal. There's only 2 vanquishes, 3 Desert Marshals left. If Iron Minds is to pull the trigger on a harsh rule, he loses his own Seraph and Desert Marshal. Valkyrie Enforcer is pretty good here, at least preventing the inevitability that Mystic Ascendant provides, but he's still a 6/6.